a yes from somebody to make sure that you are seeing my screen. Let me know, please.
Stéphane, we're not seeing your screen, we're seeing your name.
Okay. And how about now?
There we go.
Okay, fantastic. A few technical difficulties there. My apologies, everybody. All right. So the point of today is to do a quick overview of the college and where we fit in the world of education. As you are aware, there are quite a few players in education, and you'll recall from last year's presentation that we would have introduced you to the college and many of the other stakeholders. So I seem to recall that you would have been greeted by myself, the chair of council, and our deputy registrar last year during the presentation. This year, our chair of council is not able to participate in the presentation, but we do have a short video that has a message from the chair as well as her colleagues. So we'll start off with that before we jump into the presentation and the rest of the information that we want to share with you today.
Bonjour, I'm Nicole Van Winenberg. I'm an Ontario certified teacher. I'm also the chair of council of the Ontario College of Teachers. We license teachers in this province. We accredit the programs and courses that help them become teachers and remain current and relevant in their practice. And we set the standards for entry into the profession, ethics to govern your practice, advice to guide your judgment, and rules to keep students safe. In the next 2 minutes, I and a few of my colleagues are going to tell you about good governance, professionalism in teaching, and serving in the public interest. We're going to highlight who we are, what we do, and how you can serve students, your peers, and the public.
Council members set standards for the teaching profession.
Council members review and recommend regulatory change.
Nous agréons les programmes de formation à l'enseignement des facultés d'éducation de l'Ontario.
Develop and approve additional qualification course guidelines.
Provide advice to the teaching profession.
Nous établissons la mission, la vision, les valeurs et les priorités stratégiques de l'ordre.
Speak directly with Ontario's Minister of Education.
Council members talk with members.
Nous donnons des bourses d'études.
Advance professionalism in teaching.
Nous gérons nos finances de façon raisonnable.
Council has 37 members. Every 3 years, Ontario certified teachers elect 23. The Ontario government appoints 14 others. Together, they represent the public interest in teacher licensing, accreditation, and discipline. Council itself meets 4 times a year. Beyond that, members serve on a variety of committees, things like quality assurance, discipline, fitness to practice, editorial board, which oversees the content of our magazine, Professionally Speaking. Pour parler profession, vous pouvez contribuer à votre profession en votant à chaque élection. Si vous détenez un certificat de qualification et d'inscription en règle et que vous avez payé votre cotisation annuelle, vous pouvez voter pour vos collègues dans plusieurs catégories. You can also contribute to the teaching profession by participating actively in the college. Fill out a survey or participate in a consultation. Join an additional qualification writing team. And when the time is right and you're looking for a province-wide perspective on education, consider seeking election to contribute to self-regulation in the public interest. Impliquez-vous. L'ordre, c'est vous. N'oubliez pas quand vous réfléchissez à votre avenir en tant que professionnel. Don't be a passenger. Instead, become a driving force in the organization that regulates teaching across this province. with the Ontario College of Teachers. Go to oct.ca to learn more. Pour en savoir plus, visitez oeeo.ca.
All right, so that was just a quick intro from our Chair of Council, Nicole Van Woudenberg, and some of her colleagues on Council. So during the video, between herself and a few of the her colleagues, they did mention some of the college responsibilities and what falls under the college mandate. So I'm going to turn to you now, and I'm going to ask you to use the chat function to see if you recall, whether from the video or from the last year's presentation, what are some of the college's responsibilities? And just, I'm going to give you one quick tip. There are 4 main responsibilities that fall under the college mandate. So using the chat, if you can type in your responses, and I'll give you a couple of seconds to get going there. Okay, I see the answers coming in. We've got advice, ethic, professionalism, standards, accrediting programs, standards of practice, teacher discipline, licensed teacher education programs, standards of practice, ethics, discipline, investigate complaints, again, ethics, student safety, qualifications, lots with standards of practice, accreditation, AQs. Great. Thank you so much for participating, guys. Love the answers, and love that you took the time to participate and make this presentation a little bit more enriching. So moving on to the next slide, just to reveal the answers, and you'll see you did indeed get them all. So as a reminder, our main response, even though we are one of many players, our mandate is quite different than the other stakeholders in education. So we are responsible for setting the requirements for entry into the position, into the profession, meaning we will certify teachers. That is issuing the license. So what you will be applying for once you complete the program. And I say what we giveth, we also have the power or assertion to take away as well. So that's looking at the discipline aspect. So investigating and resolving complaints that are brought up against members, that also falls under our mandate. The one that a lot of people forget, but a few of you did point out, is the accreditation piece. And what is accreditation? Well, that's the review of the teacher education programs and the AQ courses. So it's a unique responsibility that falls with us. Most regulatory bodies do have that responsibility offloaded to a third party, but at the college, we do hold that responsibility, and it's part of our 4 pillars of responsibility. And lastly, but still quite important, and most of you did pull that up many times, it's the standards of practice, the ethics of the profession. So we are responsible for setting and enforcing the ethical and practice standards for the profession. So fantastic job, everybody. And again, thank you for participating. And the one thing that I want to highlight in all of this is that our work is done with transparency, and we do this in the public's interest. So a reminder that we are not there to advance or defend teachers or advance their interests, but we operate in the public's interest. So we're we need to be seen by the general public, by the profession, by the government, by the community at large to be operating in their interest and to ensure that they have trust in the profession and the professionals that are teaching their children. So the bulk of today's presentation will be on the registration process. But before we delve into the registration process, I just wanted to point out a few resources that are available to you on the website. So I'm just going to take us to the website now. And here off of the main page, what I'm going to suggest that you do, if you look under members and resources, you will see a number of resources that are made available. We have videos and we have hard copy resources, quite a few different publications. But what I want to pull your attention to are our professional advisories. So here they are. To date, we've issued 7 professional advisories, and they touch on a number of different topics. These advisories are issued every couple of years, and typically what we do is we will survey the community at large and the membership to get a sense of what are some of the emerging issues in education or address a concern that's emerging in education, and provide advice that will help us set and guide our members' practice. So here you'll see I'm not going to go through all of them, but I strongly suggest that you bookmark this page because the advisories here will definitely help demystify some of the ethical dilemmas that you may have as you start your practice, and not just ethical dilemmas, but sometimes it's also just processes and what some of the expectations uh, that are of you. Pardon, I'm just going to mute one moment. Okay, my apologies for that, everybody. For those of you who didn't see it in the chat message, we had a fire alarm drill a little bit earlier today, and they were just making an announcement about the fire alarm and how it may go off again, and I just didn't want that going through while I was presenting, so my apologies for that. All right, so as I was mentioning, the professional advisories are made available to you, and it's definitely some sound advice to help guide you in your practice. So you'll see we've got something on responding to the bullying of students, professional misconduct of a sexual nature. Professional Boundaries is our most recent advisory that was launched this year, maintaining professionalism. And so that's really having to do with your exchanges on social media and in electronic communication as a whole. Uh, the expectations as a teacher when it comes to your duty to report, and some advice about additional qualifications. again, I suggest that you bookmark this page, that you review these professional advisories. They will be of great value to you. Amongst this is one resource amongst many. You'll notice that we are on social media. So we do have a Facebook page, we have a Twitter account, we have an Instagram account. Also, we do have a YouTube channel. Many of our videos, we have monthly videos that are published, and many of our videos will highlight just exemplary practices from teachers across the province. So definitely another great pedagogical resource there. So I'm going to suggest that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Some of our advisories, we have provided some interviews and some vignettes, video vignettes as well. And there you can find those on our YouTube channel. So just a couple tips about some of the resources that are made available to you. And if you haven't bookmarked our page yet, during your first year of the program, definitely do so now, because this is a treasure trove of resources that the more you explore our website, the more you'll discover resources that are made available to you, and that will be quite helpful during your practice. All right, but before anything, it starts with your license to teach. So we are going to focus the bulk of today's presentation on the registration process. And you will recall, and I'll make sure that we give you some time at the end of the session as well to pose any questions that haven't been answered throughout the session. So you will recall that last year during our presentation, I would have encouraged you to start the application process. And we would have told you at that time last year that since you were just starting the program, it wasn't necessary to submit your entire application, but just to fill out the first couple of pages. And to fill out the first couple of pages so that we would have your contact information and we could start communicating with you. That would mean you would start receiving some of the resources that we make available to our members, such as Your College and You, which is our monthly newsletter, as well as Professionally Speaking, the quarterly magazine that is made available to our members. For those of you who did start the application process, kudos. You would have now had access to those resources. If you haven't started, not a problem. But what I'm going to suggest, I'm going to strongly suggest that by the end of this weekend, you definitely submit your application. So I'm going to pause, because every time I say definitely start the application process, during the session, what most students do, they get really eager and they actually start the application while I'm presenting. I'm going to ask you, pause. Don't do it while I'm actually presenting, because you're just going to miss some of the important information that we have to share. Wait till after the presentation, if you haven't started, to actually go through the application. The application takes approximately half an hour to 45 minutes to complete. It doesn't have to be done all in one sitting. Once you've created your password, you can go back to the application at any point in time. So rest assured, you can complete that at any time, but we encourage you to submit as soon as possible. And that's because there's a number of documents that you are going to have to submit in support of your application. So let me just go back to the website to remind you of where you can find the link to apply. So for those of you who would have already started the application process, I will remind you, becoming a teacher, applying, and you will come here to resume application. From here, you'll enter in the email address that you would have included in your application and the password that you would have created to sign into your application. If you have not yet started, you're going to the same link again, becoming a teacher, applying, but you would go to apply now instead of resume application. So let's go there now. We're not going to do that right at this time, but I will ask you to read this information before you start reading, before you actually start the application process. The other piece that you're going to need to read is the guide. So this is the guide that's applicable to your program. It's the first one, Requirements for Becoming a General Education Teacher in Ontario. And it is very important that you read this guide. What I'm going to say, I'm going to liken this to purchasing IKEA furniture and trying to go through the process of putting that furniture together without actually reading the instructions. We always know when students actually start the application and don't read the instructions because the documents that they submit don't necessarily meet the criteria that is set out for those particular documents. So all of the information is really in that guide, and I've posted the link to it in the chat as well. So very important that you download and read the guide before you start. You're going to read this information before you get to the very bottom and you hit apply. And at this point here, this is where you start the application. So you'll notice we ask you to list your names. So it's all of your names we ask you to list: first name, any middle names, even if you don't use your middle name, even if you don't like your middle name and nobody knows about it, we ask you to declare all of your names and your last name and any previous name that you may have held. So if your name has changed, we ask you to include that as well. So just by clicking on this little plus button, you could include any previous name. If you don't happen to have a middle name, of course, you're checking off this none box. Now, it is important that you do declare all of your names. And I'm spending some time on this only because every year we do get candidates who choose not to declare their names. And they do so with the thought that we won't find out. Well, we eventually do, because something will be submitted that may have your middle name, or that may have a name that you have not declared. And if that is the case, all that ends up happening is it adds delays to the processing of your application. So please make sure that you do declare all of your names. And it's also important that you declare them, because it's the way that we link documents that are received in support of your application. This also ties back to the criminal record check, because the names that you declare here, we also ask that those be listed on your criminal record check report, which I'll discuss a little bit later. So it is important that you declare everything here. The other thing to know is your certificate will be issued in your legal name. So again, I think I've spoken ad nauseum about the importance of declaring all of your names, so just make sure everything is declared here. One of the things I want to mention is common first name. That sometimes brings up a little bit of confusion. Note, we do have a little info icon here. Anywhere where you see an info icon, if you hover over it or click on it, there's a box that opens up that gives you a little more detail about that particular section. The common first name is really the name that everybody knows you by. So I'm going to use the example of, let's say, Elizabeth Smith. So the full name is Elizabeth, but nobody knows Elizabeth by her name is Elizabeth. Everybody calls her Liz. So that is her common first name. That's what she would list here. So in first name, she would list Elizabeth, and in common first name, she would list Liz. Any correspondence that we send out would be sent out in the common first name, but legal documents, such as your certificate, we would list your legal name, so your full first name. So that's what we mean by common first name. Now, if your common first name happens to be the same as your first name, there isn't any other small name that we know you by, then you just list your first name as your common first name. All right. The last piece that I want to mention is a social insurance number. We do ask for it. Now, it used to be one of the unique identifiers that we would go by. We don't necessarily require it anymore. So if you choose not to submit it, you can definitely get in touch with the college and we can generate a code for you to type in rather than typing in your social insurance number here. All right, let's move back to the tips that I want to provide with regards to the application. Okay, so I already mentioned to you, don't wait. So submit your application, complete and submit your application as soon as possible. And when I say as soon as possible, we're hoping that if you haven't yet submitted your application, that you will do so by the end of this weekend. And so the point of doing that is because you are part of the driving force behind your application. There are a number of documents that you need to submit in support of your application. And ideally, what you would want is for you to be able to submit all of the documents that you can in support of your application so that by the end of your program, the only documents left to submit are the ones for which you have no control. And that would be the transcript from the faculty that shows you've completed the program, as well as the report, which is the recommendation, their recommendation stating that you've reported the program successfully. So ideally, that's what you want, is that those are the only two outstanding documents, because if that's the case, once you complete your program and those two documents come into the college, you should move into good standing fairly quickly afterwards. And so on average, those who find themselves in that situation usually move into good standing by the end of June or early July. So submitting the application means you're completing it, you're hitting the submit button so that it comes to the college, and you're paying the fees associated with submitting the application. There are two fees that you will notice when you submit the application. One is the application processing fee, and the other one is the annual membership fee. I'm going to spend a little time discussing those two fees because it usually creates some confusion. Now, the application processing fee, it's the fee that everybody pays. It's the cost of processing your application. That is $140. The annual membership fee is currently $170. That fee is a fee that's paid as you hear in the title, annual membership fee. It's paid every year. So it's due in January of every year that you are a member. So even if you submit your application now, you're going to pay the annual membership fee now as well. You are not yet a member, so that fee will not become active, meaning that come January 2021, you will not have to pay it again because you're still a candidate in the program. The earliest that you would have to pay that fee again would be in January 2022. Sorry, I was getting caught up in my years there. In January 2022, provided you meet all of the required requirements and do move into good standing later on in 2021, your annual membership fee will be due in 2022 again. So your fee will just port over to the following year. You don't have to worry that if you submit now, you're going to have to pay that fee again in January. So I just want to make sure that's clear with everybody. When you're going to submit, after you complete the first couple of pages of the application, what you'll notice is that you'll be issued a 6-digit number. That is your application number, and it's what also becomes your member number, or your what's known as your OCT number. So that number that any other stakeholder in education asks for when they say, what's your OCT number? It's eventually, your application number eventually becomes your OCT number once you are in good standing. And what we're going to ask of you is that whenever you are submitting documents in support of your application, or whenever you're corresponding with us, whether it be by email or sending documents in, that you also include your application number so that we can give you personalized responses and not just a generic general responses. So the other tip that we say is submit documents early. Well, that goes back to my point of I'm asking you to submit your application as soon as possible and start submitting documents in support of your application. So after you submit your application to the college, we're going to ask you to wait approximately 3 weeks. So 10 to 15 business days. We have analysts on our side that review the information that you've submitted in your application. They set up your file, and then you'll be able to log back in with with the password that you created to see the list of documents that you have to submit in support of your application. You'll notice there are 2 sections to that list of documents. Those documents will be separated into the section of documents you're responsible for submitting, so they come directly from you, and documents that are submitted on your behalf, meaning someone else is sending them to the college on your behalf. It is important, not just important, essential that you do follow the directions on where those documents need to come from when they are being submitted in support of your application. If we do receive them from the wrong party, it means that document will be rendered unacceptable, and more than likely it's just going to cost you a little more to get that same document resent to us and sent from the proper source. So typically, we see this with the transcript. So you are responsible for making sure that transcripts do get submitted to us. And those transcripts need to come directly from the institution, not from you. Even if they've been issued to you and they are in a sealed envelope that you've never unsealed and you send it off to the college, we will not accept it. It does need to come directly from the institution to the college. So that's just one example. The list, like as I mentioned, the list of documents that you have to submit will be listed 2 or 3 weeks after you've submitted your application, and we indicate exactly where it needs to come from. So please follow those directions specifically to the letter. And the other thing to note is in the tips, we tell you to read the guide. Well, we specify in the guide where the documents need to come from. And I know I seem to be spending a lot of time on this fact. It's because every year we keep receiving documents from the wrong place. So it is important. I just want to stress the point that make sure you do follow the directions in the guide and what's listed in your status page once you submit your application. We mentioned to arrange for translations, and this piece really applies only to any of you who may have documents that aren't issued in French or in English. If it's issued in any other language, then we will ask you to have a translation submitted with that document. Now, prior to having any translations completed, I'm going to suggest that you wait for the college to submit, to ask you to get that translation done, only because translations are quite costly and we're quite stringent about our translation policy. So you want to make sure that you are following that policy to the letter to make sure that it's not costing you any additional money to have an additional translation submitted with the document.
Excuse me, Stefan. I'm sorry to interrupt. There's been a few comments from people asking you to speak a little bit louder or a little bit closer to the mic. It seems your voice is cutting in and out.
Oh, thank you, Lise. Okay. How is this? Any clearer?
It
My
sounds
mic
clear
is
to me.
okay. My mic is now to the maximum, and I can't really bring it any closer to my mouth, otherwise I'm eating the mic. Can we hear me clearly?
if people can just make comments in the chat to let me know if you can hear Stefan. I'm getting a lot of yeses. Sounds good. All right, good to go.
Okay, great. All right, the next point or tip, be honest, and I think that goes without saying. This ties right back to our ethical standards, and we're hoping that everybody would be honest. You will notice that in the application, at the very end, there are 17 questions. It's a declaration that speaks to your character. Those 17 questions, the hope is that your response will be a no to all of those questions, but it's quite possible that you might have to answer it, you might have to make a positive declaration there. And if so, what you will notice is that there will be a box that opens up and will ask you to provide an explanation. It is important that you are clear and detailed in the explanation if you do have to provide a positive response in the declaration. In that explanation, be clear as to the circumstances that led to that positive declaration. It is important that you get your criminal record check to us as quickly as possible as well, if you do answer yes to any of those questions. At that point, someone would be in touch with you to let you know if there are additional documents that you need to submit in support of your application. Now, rest assured, a positive declaration in the list of declaration questions does not mean or does not preclude you from certification. Just like a positive declaration on your criminal record check does not preclude you either from certification. If there is a positive notation on your criminal record check, again, we will need an explanation that describes in detail the circumstances that led to that positive declaration or that positive notation on your criminal record check. And then again, someone would be in touch with you to let you know if there are additional documents, and if so, what those additional documents or support would need to come on behalf in support of your application. So, yeah, with regards to the criminal record check, the other thing to note is that that criminal record check cannot be more than 6 months old when we receive it, and it needs to list all of your names. So you're all familiar with the criminal record check because I know that you would have ordered one last year in order to start the program and in order also to do your practicum. The difference is for the application process with the college, you don't need to request a vulnerable sector criminal record check. The basic CPIC database search is sufficient for the application process. That is not to say that we won't accept the vulnerable sector check. We definitely will. I am just saying that if you do have to request another check specifically just for the college, you don't have to bother with the vulnerable sector. You can just request a basic CPIC database search check. One, I think it is a little less costly, and I don't believe it takes as long to complete as the vulnerable sector check. So we do need an original of this document. Again, it cannot be older than 6 months at the point in time that we receive it. If what you have if the document that you have is not an original, if it's just a copy, don't bother submitting it because we won't accept it. And any documents you send to the college, we do keep, we don't send back to you. So make sure that it's an original that we're receiving. It's not older than 6 months, and it does list all of your names. So as I'd mentioned earlier, the names that you declare in your application, those names will need to show up on your criminal record check report as well, because it indicates to us that the search has been completed on all names, including names that you may have held in the past. This will tie back to the proof of ID that you will submit. And for proof of ID, we often receive photocopies of a driver's license. That's not a document that we accept. The only two documents that we'll accept as proof of ID is either a copy of your birth certificate or a copy of your passport, provided it lists all of your names. So that all ties back to, again, declaring your names, all of your names in the application, ties back to the criminal record check, ties back to being honest in the declarations you're making in your application, and it will be covered off by the copy of the ID that you will submit in support of your application. I talked about fees already, and the last piece that I want to mention is just keeping an eye on your application. So I mentioned to you that a few weeks, like 2 or 3 weeks after you submit your application, you'll be able to access your status page, which will list all of the documents you need to submit in support of your application in 2 separate sections, the ones you can submit, the ones that are submitted on your behalf. As you start submitting documents or you start sending documents in support of your application and we receive them, you will notice that the status beside that document requirement will go from not received to not assessed. That means that we've received something. That means we've received a document, it just hasn't been reviewed by anybody yet. From not assessed, ideally you want it to move to complete. Complete means that you've met that document requirement. If it moves to any other status, that means that document is incomplete or unacceptable, and there's something that you need to submit as an additional document or another document that you need to submit to make that document requirement complete. And if that is the case, there is always an explanation as to what's unacceptable about the document we received and what you can do to render that document acceptable. So it is important that you keep checking your application online regularly, because this is our communication vein. It is the only way that we will communicate with you, and this is how you can stay on top of your application and bring any changes or updates to the applications as documents are received and if they are deemed unacceptable. So the other piece that I want to mention is just the timelines. In normal times, we would ask for approximately 30 days to process documents that are received in support of your application. We all know that these are not normal times now, and there are quite a few delays with different services, including Canada Post. So I want you to be aware that as you submit documents, there are some things, even though we do say the updates do happen regularly on your status page, we are going to ask you to be patient. And I would say that our timelines are no longer approximately 30 days to process the documents that are received, but it can go from to approximately 50 or 60 days, just because of the circumstances that we are facing now. So that's an added incentive for you to start submitting your documents now, so that all the waiting time for the processing of documents can happen while you're completing the program, rather than having that delay happen at the end or at the completion of your program. So those are the tips that I have for you with regards to the application. Before I turn it to you for all of the questions that I see are coming through the chat. The last piece that I want to mention is the math proficiency test, because I know that will be on everybody's mind. That math proficiency test, I know that some of you possibly would have sat the pilot test last year, the pilot test that took place in February and early March. If you did and you obtained passing marks, then just know that those marks have already been received at the college. Even if you did not have an application that the marks were received and they're sitting in a database. And so those will be considered to meet the requirement if you did meet passing marks. So you don't have to worry if you did sit the pilot test and you did get the achieved passing mark. Those results have been communicated to the college and they will be part of your application. Now, for those of you who did not have an opportunity to sit the math test and are concerned about what's happening this year, we currently do not have any information, but we are committed to making sure the information is shared with you as soon as it's made available. So I am on our home page now. I'm scrolling to the bottom because there we have a link to a page that deals specifically with the math proficiency tests. And we have some information here and we have quite a few FAQs. I suggest that you bookmark this page because as information becomes available, it will be made available to you. It'll be made be made a news item also on this page, and I know that the faculties are committed to sharing that information with you also as soon as they are made aware of the information that can be shared with you. So I am going to stop here and give you an opportunity to answer any of the questions that have not been addressed during the presentation.
Thank you, Stefan. Yes, questions were coming in fast and furiously, so I've tried to kind of package them together. So there was a lot of questions that came in about fees, when to pay the fees, how to pay the fees, are the fees carried over to next year, and that sort of thing. If you could please address that.
Okay, with regards to the fees, you will submit the application. You have to submit fees. There are two fees, the application processing fee as well as the annual membership fee. The application fee is $140. The annual membership fee is $170. So let me reiterate again. You have to submit both fees in order for your application to be processed. The annual membership fee is due in January of every year. Even though you submit your application now, you will not be required to submit an annual membership fee come January 2021. The fee that you've paid now will port over because you are not yet a member. So I'm repeating again what I mentioned earlier. The expectation is that you probably will not pay that fee again till January 1st, 2022, if you did move into good standing in 2021. I hope that clarifies.
Thank you, Stefan. A lot of questions also came in about the criminal record check. I know you addressed this during the presentation. There's a lot of confusion about police stations only issuing electronic copies right now during COVID versus hard copies. So if you could just kind of repeat what is accepted, what kind of police check is accepted?
Okay, yes, I know that some police stations are not issuing hard copies. They're issuing just an electronic copy. The electronic copy is going to be accepted. So do not print it. You would just submit the electronic version that has been submitted to you. Now, one thing that I'm going to suggest before you even submit anything is that before you submit a criminal record check, I should say, what I suggest that you do is complete and submit the application. There will be some details, some more details provided on the criminal record check document and what's being accepted currently. The other piece that I want to mention, because I know that causes some confusion and I just saw it fly through in the questions with regards to vulnerable sector. For the application process with the college, it is not required. I know that for practicum, it is. So what I'm letting you know is that if that's what you have, it is not more than 6 months old, and it is an original, yes, you definitely can submit it. We will accept it. However, if you do have to request another criminal record check because what you have is not an original, or it's stale dated because it's more than 6 months old, and you're only requesting another criminal record check for the application with the college, don't bother with the vulnerable sector. Just ask for a basic CPIC database search. That will be sufficient for the application. Hope that clarifies.
Thank you, Stefan. I had a few students ask about what happens if they don't plan on teaching in Ontario. Should they get their OCT, or can they transfer it to a different province?
Great question. So all of you are completing a program in Ontario that is accredited and does lead to certification. So I'm going to say definitely do get certified, even if you do not plan on teaching here in Ontario. There is labor mobility across the provinces in Canada, meaning that if you are certified if you are certified as a professional in one province, the other provinces and territories have to recognize it as well. The one thing to note about that is that you have to have been certified in your home province first, meaning you will have to get certified in Ontario. Even if you plan on leaving and going to, say, BC or Alberta, or Saskatchewan, wherever you plan on going across Canada, you do have to get certified first. So get your certification, and then you're going to complete the certification process with another province or territory. Know that when you do start the application process with another jurisdiction, sorry, not jurisdiction, but another province or territory in Canada, they are going to seek your certification in Ontario. That's why you do have to get certified here first. In addition, they'll be asking for another document that you can only have submitted once you are certified. So that's, oh my goodness. Marianne, if you're if you're listening, help me out. I can only think of the term in French, l'attestation de qualification pédagogique.
Statement of professional standing. SOCS. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Marianne. I was only thinking in French for a second there. So yes, you'll be required to submit a statement of professional standing, and that can only be issued once you are in good standing. And so you do definitely have to get certified first. Now, afterwards, if you do choose to let your membership lapse because you've left the province, that's not a problem. What you will notice is that your standing will move, or your status will move to suspended for non-payment of fees, which is simply an administrative status, meaning that if you pay a reinstatement fee, your status moves back to good standing. It's not a disciplinary status by any means. But again, I stress you do have to get that initial certification.
Thank you, Stefan. I know we already spoke about fees, but there seems to be quite a bit of concern about affordability of fees during the pandemic. So the questions are, is there a payment plan? Is there a way we can pay the fees over time, or do they need to be paid all in one chunk? And how soon do they need to be paid?
Okay, I understand these are some uncertain and some difficult times for many, and I really don't want to sound unsympathetic, but unfortunately there is no easy way of saying that there isn't a payment plan and there isn't any way to waive the fees. The fees have to be paid completely in order to have your application processed. So yes, those fees will have to be submitted if you do want your application to be processed, and if you want the documents that you're submitting in support of your application to be reviewed, those fees have to be submitted.
Thank you, Stefan. I do have a question regarding names. So an individual posted that their parents changed the spelling of their middle name when they were approximately 6 months old. So do they need to attach a copy of their birth certificate and other information, or what kind of information do they need to attach to their application?
So I'm going to speak in general terms. If your proof of ID, so your birth certificate matches the name, the spelling, and the correct spelling or the current spelling, then there isn't anything additional that you need to submit. However, if the spelling is different, your current spelling is different from what's listed on your birth certificate, then you are going to have to submit a written explanation as to why there's a difference, and then we can determine if there's additional documents that you need to submit in support of your application.
Thank you. So I'm just cognizant of the time. It's 9:59. Did you want to try and take another question or two, or how is everybody doing for time? I know the students have another session in 10 minutes.
I think it's Tracy here. I think there are a couple of questions with regards to unqualified supply, and maybe the college could identify their stance in unqualified supply. So if you could answer that, and then I'll come in and finish the session.
Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you, Tracy. So I know that every year this is a question that comes up often, whether as a candidate you can do some supply work. And from the college's point of view, you can if you're being requested and if you've been hired by a school board to do some supply work. I know that some faculties have put into place or set some rules indicating that candidates are not to do any supply work while they are in the program. So one thing to double check is what the faculty's stance is on allowing you to to do supply work. I know that in these circumstances now, there are quite a few school boards that are turning to the faculties and turning to candidates because there is a shortage of teachers and asking candidates to do some day-to-day supply. And I know that that's happening across the province. So I know that with the college, there isn't a problem. The school boards do have an emergency policy put into place allowing unqualified teachers, and by unqualified, that means uncertified teachers, to take over and do some day-to-day supply for a maximum of 10 consecutive days. Other than that, any other permutations or restrictions, what could possibly happen with the faculty, but the faculty would let you know if that's the case. So Tracy could probably fill in if that's
So I'll fill in on that. Certainly the legislation allows school boards to be able to hire people who are uncertified. The Ontario Teachers Federation and all of the federations, all the affiliates, want our candidates to understand the inherent risk that comes with uncertified supply in terms of protection if an incident happens, if an allegation happens, or if an accident happens where our candidates may be held accountable. So we want to make sure that you understand, the candidates understand there's an inherent risk to do that. If you are missing class, or if you are missing practicum days to do supply work, then you are potentially, you will come forward to our professional ethics committee at the faculty, because it would mean that you are not fulfilling your responsibilities as a teacher candidate. So you need to know what the inherent risks are for doing uncertified supply. The legislation says that a teacher in Ontario schools is a certified teacher. The unions are making you aware of what the inherent risks are. You are you are adults, and you can make decisions on how that might play out. Thanks very much, Stefan and Marianne and Lise, for clarifying questions. I really want to make sure that our candidates understand that there is always someone at the end of their phone line for questions about their application, about what they need, about what it looks like, all of those sorts of things, you know, in terms of what going forward in their application. In terms of timeline from the faculty, our program ends at the end of April. We have about a 2-week time frame for submitting final marks, for putting together everything that we need to do to send to Senate to confer your degree. Once your degree is conferred by Senate, then we will send the recommendations from the faculty. After your degree is conferred, then your final transcript can be sent, and that is something that you are responsible for. So I know we'll spend a little bit more time about the next steps for as you move forward to certification. But I strongly recommend that if you have a question, that you contact the college directly in order to answer your specific question. It will help with making sure that there isn't wrong information being passed, you know, within our network. So please, lots of the questions that you had were very specific. So please make sure that you contact them directly. If there's any of the questions that haven't been answered, we certainly will put together answers and we'll send them out as part of this recording for this session. Again, I want to really thank everyone, and we'll see many of you in a few minutes in our next session. Thank you.